All right, how's everybody doing today? If someone could give me a shout out in the comments, that would be great, just to let me know that you can hear me, because I almost forgot to add myself to the screen before I started talking here. If anybody is wondering, I just played the trailer for Fade to Blue, which is the new books coming out from the Fourth Age. We have the first two done. I'm not sure if I'm going to do them. Well, it's a little bit up in the air about whether or not we're going to do them in what format. Anyways, if someone could really give me a shout out in the comments, because I honestly, oh, great. Thank you, Jewel. I thought I was talking to myself, but we had a little bit of a snag. We were going to come out with Fade to Blue fairly quickly, but the fellow I had doing the cover had to bail on doing the cover. So, and he was the guy who did, if anybody knows my books, he did the poster for Cardinal. It's that spectacular Cardinal poster that he did. I don't know if I have a picture of that here in among any of my stuff, but he was supposed to do the cover for Fade to Blue as well. We had it all sketched out and everything else, and here's the cover, or part of the poster that he did for Valiant Heroes of the Cardinal. Anyways, he was supposed to do a cover for Fade to Blue, but that has now been put on hold just because he is basically got an actual job rather than doing art on the internet. So he had to bail on me, although we just had the sketches done for the cover for the Fade to Blue. But anyways, so it may be delayed by a little bit more. We're still going to get it out certainly by summertime. And I have my artist working on the third story, which each story is about 23 pages long. So the first two are done. We're working on the third one just coming up. So the link is in the description for Fade to Blue. If you want to go over to the early bird page and leave your name and your email address, you will be informed when the project goes live. So that's what we're talking about. The trailer that I played right here a few minutes ago, that's Fade to Blue, the new trailer that I have done. Let's see who is here before I go any further. We have Gate of Marvel. How you doing? Gate of Marvel says childhood's end along with Terror in a Tiny Town are by far among the best single issue stories published by Marvel. Burns, finest to be sure, and so early in his run, yet have fun. Honestly, I was on X and I posted this cover for Fantastic Four yesterday, and I was just blown away about how many people loved this book, just like Gate of Marvel. Everybody who read this book loved it. And I thought I'd put it on here because I want to talk about why comics will never die today. And it's called Childhood's End. And I thought that was a little bit appropriate. We don't have to have a childhood's end for comics. We don't have to. Who else is here? Pedro's here. Greg is here. Nice to see that regulars. Vaz is here. George is here. Let's see. Jewel, of course, is here. Jimmy is here. How you doing, Jimmy? Ryan Banks is here. The Chug Bug is here. Haven't seen you in a little while. Zach Dan is here. And let's see. Everybody's raiding over from John's Long Box. Great to see. Let's see. What's the name of the artist on Fade to Blue? Honestly, I can never remember my artist's name off the top of my head because he has his own books, but he uses a pseudonym for his name. So that's why I don't want to talk about it. I don't know what name he wants me to use. That's why I never put his name on. I can't remember the name of his book, but he did a crowdfunded book earlier. I have to ask him what name I can use because he does beautiful stuff and he does stuff in black and white. And that's why I contacted him, because I wanted to do Fade to Blue as a film noir sort of throwback, because it's set in 1929, 1930. And I wanted to have that feel of black and white, and he does black and white spectacularly. So anyways, let's see. Tony also says, RJ, did you ever read the Kirby issue from Pacific Comics? Pacific Comics? I'm not entirely sure about the Kirby stuff from Pacific Comics, unless it was, his other version of Captain America. What the heck? Fighting American? Was that Pacific Comics Kirby stuff? I'm not entirely sure. That stuff I did read. But besides that, I don't really think I have. Anyways, I wanted to talk tonight about why comics will never die. Now, this is going to be a short topic, and if anybody has comments for me about anything, what I'm talking about tonight, about anything that I post, about my books, about my other videos, just put them in the comments, and I will get to your question before we leave tonight. Just put a question mark on it or tag me so that I know that the question is for me. Thank you very much. And I will get to those questions. But I wanted to talk about why comics will never die. And I wanted to get into that before we go any further into the comments, because I know you guys have questions. But I ran across this video, and it just came out in the last couple of days. Some of you may have seen it. And it talks about why and how your brain actually interprets a lot of the signals from your eyes. And it talks about how your eyes are never focused on anything but a very, very small thumbnail of what you can actually see with your entire eyes. Everything else is basically a blurred extra area around the thumbnail, which your brain basically fills in the blanks in order to get you to see an entire picture when your brain doesn't actually allow your eyes to see an entire picture. What you're looking at when you open your eyes and see things is as it says, going through some of the science of it, is a combination of many different pictures that your brain puts together and allows you to interpret as one entire picture. And it got me to thinking, because it basically was saying that within a second, your eyes usually transfer into micro movements about 3 to 4 times within every second. And then it takes a snapshot of what is focusing on during that little second, during that moment that it stops, and then darts around again and stops. And that's how your brain constructs the entire picture that you see around you. Because it went into a lot of this idea of how your brain actually constructs a reality for you to see. It's not what actually happens within front of you. And I thought to myself, this is exactly what Will Eisner was talking about when he was talking about in his books written, I think in the 70s, about how to write a comic and what the unique structure of comics is and how a person's brain fills in not only the rest of the picture, but also the movement that goes between the panels. And again, I don't think this is new science that they're going on about with the way that your eyes work and the way that your brain interprets it. It may be. I've just run across this stuff in the last little bit. But if that is indeed a new discovery about how your brain works and how your eyes work and how your brain interprets the sense of sight, it explains exactly why comics will never die. It's because that's exactly what you do when you're reading a comic. It's a simplified version of what your eyes do every day. They're darting around to things which only get looked at for a microsecond, a very, very fraction of a second, and interprets those small things which are only in a very, a thumbnail picture, as Will Eisner would say, a snapshot of something that doesn't actually have movement, but your brain interprets it and then translates it into movement. And that's exactly what comics do. And good comics, anyways. Good comics, as they are laid out, I would say, according to like a Will Eisner plan, have a unique structure. And as he says, not only have a unique structure, but no other medium can work like comics work. You can take comics and translate them into other mediums like television shows and movies. But in his opinion, you can never take television and movies and translate them backwards into comics. It doesn't work correctly because it's a unique medium that has its own rules. And in his mind, as he says within his books, the only thing that even comes close is stage plays. But to me, again, the idea that our eyes and our brains interpret sense of sight in that way, in looking at very specific things for only a fraction of a second and interpreting that fraction of a second as your eyes dart around to what is in essence almost a still picture in front of you, and interprets it and then translates that into movement, just explained to me in a scientific way why comics will never die, why comics actually became such a beautiful medium, and why they will continue to be so in the future, even though we have to go through this rough area that we're in right now. It's because it's working with the way that your brain and your eyes actually work and move, and allows you to interpret a story with the most minimum, even though it is a lot of work to write a comic and draw a comic and all that stuff, but it is a minimum of fuss to put down a visual story as compared with something like a television show or a movie. But it allows for the movement to be interpreted by your brain in a very specific way that works with what your eyes are set in order to figure out, in order to interpret the world for you. And I was just blown away when I watched that video. I can't even remember who did it. He has like millions of subscribers, so I'm sure you'll probably run across it at some point. But again, to me, this shows me the beauty of comics. This shows me why and how comics are supposed to be done the Will Eisner way. It talks, and let me see if I can put some Will Eisner stuff up in the background. I might have some here from one of my very old videos about Will Eisner. Let's see. We do have some Will Eisner stuff we can put up in the background. But yeah, the fact that if the new science that I've run across is correct, and that's how your eyes interpret reality that it sees, and your brain interprets that reality as well. Because it was also talking about in that video how your different senses take different time amounts to get to your brain. So sound takes longer than vision, touch takes shorter than sight, all these kinds of things. So again, it's taking the idea that your brain interprets all of these different sensory inputs from sight and sound and touch in a different way when it comes into the brain, and then makes it into a whole picture. So again, that would explain why, if that is indeed the case, you can go into something like comics. Why is that? It should be, that's only a still of the Will Eisner. I thought I had more than just stills. Let me see if I can figure out if we have more than stills, but put up some more stills anyways. It explains why your brain can interpret a comic and sequential art in the way that it does, because it may be waiting for other sensory input that just doesn't come, because it doesn't have to come. You can just have the visual and it still works, and it still interprets it as movement. Anyways, I know I'm just rambling at this point, but honestly, learning more and new things about how the brain works and how your eyes work, because I'm always talking about color and how, the male eyes are structured different than female eyes, literally, and we can see different colors, and how that interprets onto the page of what is good color palette for superhero comics, different, let's say, romance comics, things like that. This is something that needs to be incorporated, as far as I'm concerned, into how people make comics. If they're looking, what I used to talk about a lot was how Marvel came up with, we have to make comics in a new way starting around 2009. And they just went into the political and decided that was the new way that they were going to go. No. I think that we need to take the old form of how to make comics, like this Will Eisner stuff, and how he explained it, and then superimpose what we know about how your brain works, how eyes work, how female and male eyes work, and how you interpret the world, and then lay that down on top of how to make a good comic, how to make a new comic, and draw in your reader in a more instinctual way, so that it will be something that is going to have a new life to it. And I honestly think that is one of the future avenues of comics, if anybody actually gets to do that. I'm trying to do it myself, but I'm just a guy working with a couple of people trying to make some comics by myself. So, if a company actually started to do that, it would revolutionize the way the comics are made. And I think that that is what comics are going to be due. And I think that means that comics are never going to die, quite honestly. All right, let me put that beautiful cover of Fantastic Four up in the background, and I'll start to get to some of the comments, since I've been speaking for at least 15 minutes. I know today I thought that I was going to do an entire Saturday video on this topic, but then I said to myself, no, it's a comic specific topic. So I wanted to do it and make comics great again, because you guys really appreciate talking about what make comics great. So I thought I'd do it here for you guys. All right, let's scroll up a little bit and see if I can go back to where I had left off with the questions. Scrolling up. All right, let's see if anybody has any questions. Tony's question about Kirby. Here we are. Ryan says, RJ, comics will never die because every generation needs inspirational hero archetypes. Most ancient cultures depict their heroes in battles and hunt using sequential art. Yep. Again, there's another reason right there. It's the reason why art will never die. I don't think art will ever die. I don't care about AI and AI generated art. Again, I think that the human brain can distinguish what is actually created by a human and what is not in an instinctual way. And we're going to learn more and more about that as AI tries to take over but fails. But you're absolutely right. The reason why comics will never die is because art will never die. But the great thing about comics is there's sequential art, which is the not superimposing, but the I don't know what you'd call it, the channeling of movement into art so that it becomes a moving picture, even though it's static images on a page. All right, scrolling down a little bit. Let's see. Who else is here? Zaktan says, Zaktan says, comic books are the pinnacle of the picture book, and there will always be respect percentage of the public who process images better in the mind's eye with text. Agreed, Zaktan. Agreed. Let's see. Manny is here. How you doing, Manny? Manny says hello to the chat. Scrolling down. See if I have any more comments. Baz has a good comment. He says, good comics will never die. Bad comics will become relevant. Indeed. I think almost all of the comics that you've seen for the last 15 to 20 years will just disappear into a vacuum of nothing, like the campy 1960s DC comics that no one ever reads anymore, except as basically a lark. Let's see. Pedro is here. How you doing, Pedro? Pedro says, picture says more than 1,000 words. Under that logic, a comic book from a store is larger than yeah, I agree. A picture does say 1,000 words. That's one of the things. I can't remember. I think it was Mike Barron that I talked to about this last time he was on my channel. I said, have you ever written a wordless comic? And he said, absolutely not. He thought that was a waste of pages. I don't think that's a waste of pages, quite honestly. Now, my first attempt probably wasn't the best when I did the silent 8-page story for the Valiant Heroes, but it was an attempt at a silent story. And I tried to put in as much visual as possible, but I think silent stories work best when they are done by a artist who's also trying to write the story. They're of one mind, obviously, because they're one person in telling the story. So yeah, pictures say 1,000 words, and I think even silent comics are worth reading. Tony says the obvious. Yes, Tony, you are correct. Comics will never die, but Marvel and DC might. They might indeed. Tony says, RJ, what was your thoughts on Camelot 3000? As a kid, I liked the art, but I didn't really like the story. Yep, exactly. I'm right on, Tony. As John was saying, almost the exact same thing as we're going over Camelot 3000 over on John's channel just an hour ago. I would read the story, and the art was beautiful. It would just draw you, it would suck you in every time. But I would read the story, and by the time I got to the end, it was like, I didn't really enjoy reading that. It was a visually spectacular, but I didn't enjoy the story. And sometimes it wasn't the story itself. It was usually some small thing that the writer had put in that really just ticked me off, quite honestly. And it was their interpretation of a lot of different mythological stories mixed with science and the future. It didn't really sit well with me. Scrolling down. Gordon says women make better color artists, in my opinion. Well, I would say this, Gordon, since women can literally see more shades of color than men can, I think that they have a more in tuned way of dealing with color art. But at the same time, it is my distinct opinion that, let's say, superhero comics and a lot of sequential art in general are more attractive to males because males are able to process shapes and movement better than women. Women can process color better. Men can process shapes and movement better. And sequential art is based on shapes and movement more than color. Color is an extra to sequential art. We look at manga and we can see that just playing out over and over again. And the thing is that if you have a medium which is more attractive to the male eye, literally the male constructed eye, how male eyes are constructed, you need to have a simplified color palette. A feminine color palette does not work with sequential art. Maybe if your sequential art is something like romance comics, maybe, because the sequence that is to bring you along through the story is more the emotions that you feel rather than the movement of the characters and where they're going on the page and how they have to translate between the gutters and from one panel to another. Maybe female artists as colorists would work better there, but as something that has movement to it, like superhero comics, no, I'm sorry, you have to have a simplified color palette. And that's not to say that women can't work with simplified color palettes even better, but it's one of my things that I always have to go back to my colorist and tell them, no, stop putting in so many colors. Just go with a simplified color palette. He's a great colorist though. Let's see. George says, that is true. That is why the Iliad is still being printed today, even though it is 3,000 plus years old. I love the Iliad. Read it over and over again. Haven't read it in a while. I have, well, it's the Richard Latimer translation that I usually read as a translation, unless I'm going to the Loeb Classic Library, which also has the Greek on the the left-hand page, has the Greek on the left-hand page, so I can read both. Let's see, scrolling down. Mystic says, we'll still have comics after the nuclear war. Well, I don't know if I want to make this analogy, Mystic, but you're basically saying that comics are cockroaches. And I don't think that would be very far off. Just because I've seen so many battered comics in so many different places, shoved in holes and just dirty and grimy and shoved in a corner and everything else. It might remind you of a cockroach, but that's part of the charm of comics, is that they're throwaway. They're supposed to be throwaway entertainment, and be a good read for everybody who wants to pick it up. Let's see, scrolling down. The Jugbug says, Fourth Age, have read the new Transformers series by Skybound. I found the characters and story to be what I wish more comics were. No, I haven't. As I think someone asked me, it might have been you a couple of weeks ago. I haven't read the Skybound Transformers, although I do have a couple of people who have told me that it's good stuff. Let's see. Scrolling down. Alessandro is here with the new avatar. How you doing, Alessandro? Let's see. He says, RJ, I've noticed that progressives fetishize trauma and mental illness. Absolutely. They fetishize it because they're trapped in it themselves. They have no way to get out. So they try to make it as if it was something that is positive. It's not. But you're absolutely right, Alessandro. Let's see. Scrolling down. Pedro says, RJ, what do you think about the principal reason of why people rejected so badly the fourth so-called movie of Captain America? I haven't seen the fourth Captain America movie. I don't think I have any real inclination to go see the fourth Captain America movie. One reason that I've heard people say that it's not any good is because it's simply trying to tie together a dozen or more things from, well, basically hanging threads from other Marvel properties, other Marvel movies, and other Marvel shows. And therefore, it just gets bogged down and never allows itself to actually tell its own story. Now, that may be structurally the problem with it, but I think the biggest problem with it is the same problem that they had with the introduction of this stupid idea of Sam Wilson, Captain America, in the comics. It never flew in the comics, and it's never going to fly with people who know who Captain America is. Trust me, I have been around since before this whole boom within comic book movies. And when I started to go see things like the first Captain America and things like that, I went with people who had no idea what comics were, had no idea of even what comic characters belong where. I would go to watch the movies and people would say, why isn't Superman in the Avengers? And I had to explain to them what the difference was between Marvel and DC. So normies don't understand this idea that they're trying to push, which shouldn't be pushed anyways, of a mantle that can be transferred from one person to another. They won't get it. They just won't get it. It's like, this is supposed to be a Captain America movie. I don't see Captain America. This is the Falcon. This is not Captain America. You can tell me he's Captain America all you want, but he's not Captain America. Now, us diehard comic fans know that and know it hasn't worked in the comics and know that, Falcon is a great character as Falcon or as the sidekick of Captain America in those early books, but he's not Captain America. So you're not going to convince the general comic book readers of that fact, again, proven through comic sales of the Sam Wilson Captain America comics. And you're never going to, as far as I'm concerned, convince normies who just go see Marvel movies of this either. They're just going to be confused. So you're shooting yourself in both feet, if you ask me, by making that movie. You really are. Scrolling down. Gordon says maybe Mike Baron meant writing silent comics was a waste of typing paper. Maybe. Let's see. Alessandro says, RJ, what do progressives mean by fairness? What do progressives mean by fairness? The idea of fairness for progressives is, what do you call it? Equity. Equity is their idea of fairness, which is basically the basis of communism. Everybody gets the same. No one gets to have more than another. Equity is the idea of fairness. Everybody gets the same. We have to, I'm sorry to be that guy, but yeah, it's just a Marxist idea of the collective. That's their idea of fairness. And that never works. We've been trying this for 100 years or more, and the only time a collective ever works is if it is a very small number of very dedicated people. You get over 20 in a collective and it just starts to fall apart. And in no way it's going to ever work within a actual government of a society. But yeah, that's what they mean by fairness, the collective. Let's see. Scrolling down. See what we have here. Let's see. Scrolling down. Alessandro says, RJ, I still haven't understood what the progressive definition define as privilege. Again, it's just Marxism, Alessandro. What they're talking about is privilege is just oppressor and oppressed. Privileged means you're an oppressor. Just go back to the Marxist ideas of oppressor and oppressed, the working class and the bourgeoisie. The privileged is bourgeoisie. That's all it is. Let's see. Zach Tan says, basically, whatever they want. Oh, he's trying to answer Alessandro's question. He says, basically, whatever they want fairness to mean to justify their power, ostensibly, it is about equal outcomes, but the commissars always get more equal outcome than others. Yeah, it's you basically said the same thing that I did, Zach Tan, but in a different way. It's because what they want is a collective, and a collective never works when it's more than a handful of people. It always becomes unjust, and it becomes where the tyranny of the people in control get more, and everybody else gets less. Because you got to remember, Marx always says that that tyrannical way that you impose the commune on an entire nation is one of the phases that he supposedly says you have to go through in order to get to quote unquote true communism, but you can never actually get past it. Never. It's just going to end there. So yeah, they always get these unequal outcomes. So well said, Zach Dan. Let's see. Chuckbug says, fourth age, any tips to flesh out a story? Any tips to flesh out a story? I always find, I'm writing right now one of the chapters for my Artemis book, and I always find that I'm doing it in an almost Marvel way, a Marvel method way. I find that I draw out a outline first of how many pages. I know exactly how many pages I have and how many pages I'm going to put in the chapter. So I just I prime the pump by getting myself a page where I write down the numbers of each page, and then I have in my head the basic outline of where the story is going to go. I try to situate that in as best as possible according to the page numbers of beginning, middle, end. Usually I have too many things to put in a chapter with that many limited pages, but sometimes I have less. And when I have less, then I think to myself, what is the breaking point of how your reader is going to translate from one scene to another? And, you think about climax and we'll say denouement, I guess it is. You think about your climaxes, try to give your change of scene a climax, and if you can expand on that climax and make it more visually appealing, then that's how you flesh out a story when you're doing a comic, if you ask me, or a graphic novel. That's what I'm talking about. So to me, that's how you flesh out when I'm doing when I'm writing, anyways, for my comics and graphic novels. It's basically give the audience more of what they want and more of what will make the transition between scenes, better. Rex is here. How you doing, Rex? Nice to see you. All right, scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. See if there's any more comments for me, any more questions for me. Tony says, RJ, did you ever read Kirby's Captain Victory? Yes, I did. It was structured to be a pseudo sequel to The Fourth World. The main character is all but stated to be Orion's son. Yes, I do have in my collection some of the Captain Victory. Not a whole lot. So I didn't read the entire thing. As with all Jack Kirby stuff, you need to almost get into it like a hot bath in order to appreciate it correctly and understand the mind of Jack Kirby to some extent, because yes, you're right. He did this many times, even moving from DC to Marvel. He tried to recreate basically the Fourth World with the Eternals. So yeah, it's very, I don't know how you put it. If you're a Kirby completist, you must go get the Captain Victory stuff. We'll put it that way. Scrolling down. Gordon says, should talking heads be confined to romance comics? Yes, I would say talking heads should be confined to romance comics. Again, why? Because again, if you're talking about romance comics, women are typically your main audience for romance comics. And talking heads work on romance comics because A, you're talking about sequential art that's dependent upon emotion, and B, women's eyes, as I have said in many videos, are trained. We know this from experimentation, simple experiments on tiny little babies that can first see anything besides just blurs of color, that female eyes with their structure, and that structure being looking more towards the depth of color rather than shapes of movement, are more attracted to human faces, and boys are more attracted to mechanical things. So since Human faces are what girl eyes are attracted to from the very first time that they can see faces. Talking Heads works within romance comics, which has a primary base of female readers. It works. Let's see. Scrolling down. People are talking about the Indian Ocean and the Fifth Fleet. I'm not entirely sure. Zaktan says, what do I like better, the Iliad or the Odyssey? They're completely different stories, completely different structure of stories. I love the Iliad for its almost historic nature. I love the Odyssey because it takes that story and just puts so much myth into it that it's almost a mythological story in itself from place to place. Whereas mythology plays a part underlying within the Iliad, mythology, I think, is the mainstay of the Odyssey. So what do I like better? I would say I probably read the Iliad more than the Odyssey. I don't know if I could say I like it better, but I certainly have read it more times than the Odyssey. And I don't know. It's just the historian in me that likes the history. Although I do love myth. Let's see. Tony says, RJ, I know of your love for comics of the 80s, but even you would have to agree that they are incredibly woke. A lot of them are. If you go back to, go back to the 70s, go back to Green Arrow stuff. Yeah, you go back to some of Van Nocenti's run, even in Daredevil, it's like, yeah, you're getting a little too far afield there. And things like that. And, but yeah, I agree that there were certainly a lot of strains in there. If you get into even the Hulk run, the late 80s Hulk run, yeah, sure. But at the same time, at the very least, back then, we could close our eyes to it and say, yeah, I don't care. And if you do that, then your sales would start to decrease and you're going to get a new writer. So again, I wouldn't say that the 80s comics were more woke. They're proto woke than not, but it depends on what style of comics you're going to, what company you're going to, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I agree. There was plenty of woke stories that we can look back and see now through the lens of where they were going with it in 2025. Let's see, scrolling down. Oh, by the way, just one addition to this. I was around and reading Alpha Flight from issue number 1. Loved Alpha Flight. John Byrne just made that book incredibly beautiful. When they took Northstar and made him into the, well, let's just say the pride flag waving character that he is today, people did not like it. I can tell you right now. Because I read the letter pages at that point, and 2 to 3 issues after that storyline came out within Alpha Flight, people in the letter page were not happy at all, especially French Canadians. All right, scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. Rex says, RJ, have you heard of the Marian argument? Basically, the dismissal of it's just fiction. Why does it matter? No, I haven't. That is something I should look up because that sounds like a question that would be very intriguing to hear the answer for me anyways. Let's see, scrolling down. Mystic says, someone once found a battered copy of Action Comics #1 inside a wall of their house. Yes, indeed. Someone also found a battered copy of Action Comics #1 sandwiched within the pages of a very big dictionary that they bought at an auction. So yeah, they're out there still. I think that was probably about 10 years ago that last one happened, maybe 15. Let's see, scrolling down. Greg says, copyright will force our culture to spiral until it returns to 35 years and go into public domain. Not sure. Copyright will force our culture to spiral until it returns to 35 years ago and go into public domain? Comics is still the best for us to run the shadows, to use cyberpunk terms. Not entirely sure where you're going with that, Greg, but it seems like something that I would agree with if you're talking about public domain and how it's going to, I think, loop around. Scrolling down. Zektan says, RJ has been around that long. He's not 20 something. No, unfortunately, I'm not. Let's see. Well, fortunately for me, I was around when comics were great. So scrolling down. Michael says RJ is like 50 something. Something. Let's see. I'm not as old as John. Let's just say that. I'm not as old as John over John's long box. Not quite. Ryan says, RJ, how many panels per page are too many? I cannot stand comic books that look like frame by frame movie storyboards. That is a very difficult question to answer, Ryan. Again, if you're going with manga, I would say 4 to 6. If you're going with normal comic books, I would say 6 to 9 would be your standard. You can go higher than that depending on your action sequence and how fast things move. If you're getting, let's say, very quick hand movements in order to explain things, sure, that's no problem. I've seen, again, stuff like the early Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. books, and even the Batman books from, let's say, the early 80s, 1980, 1981. They have sometimes like 25 panels on a page, just because they get smaller and smaller and smaller, and they would loop around and all these kinds of things, and you'd have like a keyhole and it would be its own panel. So you can certainly shove in a whole lot of panels, but whether or not that's going to take the reader along to a better story or not, I'm not entirely sure. Again, I would say standard for comics, North American comics, would be 6 to 9. You can up it to 12 if you really want to push it. Other than that, I'm not entirely sure you should put more than 12 on a page, unless, again, you are, let's say, the person who is not only writing but also drawing the thing. You would have much more control over panel style and effect that way. But those are my opinions. Scrolling down. So that's basically the way I write a comic. Is I assume we're going to have 6 to 9 panels per page, and if it's less, I can go with less. I can go with splash pages of 1. And if it's more, that is dictated by, I think, the pacing of the story. Scrolling down. John is here. How you doing, John? John says, do you think Patriarch is a better character than Thomas Valiant? I'm sorry, no, John. Thomas Valiant is better than the Patriarch. Let's just put that out there for the whole world to know. All right, scrolling down. I'm not sure if Zaktan, this is for me, but I think I will read it. He says, characters are ultimately not real people. Some just work better as side characters or main characters, depending on the character. Okay, I agree. Some do work. It's basically whether or not they have their own character arc. They're a side character if they don't have their own character arc. But that would be, again, for character-driven stories. You can have characters that don't have character arcs if they're complete heroes, like sometimes you would think of Superman being. And it's more of a action-based storyline rather than character-based storyline. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see if there's any more questions for me. There's a lot of crosstalk, which I love to see in the comments, but I have to get through in order to make sure I answer everybody's questions. Gordon says, RJ, 15th in this collective, tops. 15th? 15. Oh, okay. 15 people in the collective, tops. Okay. I understand. Yeah, it's basically what I was saying, Gordon. Let's see. Scrolling down. Rex says, truth be told, RJ, the more I learn about Karl Marx, the less I like him. You shouldn't like him at all. He was a nasty individual in many, many ways. And a privileged, he was someone writing about how to free the working class when he was the most privileged and obnoxious person that you would ever run across in his his timeline and sphere. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see, scrolling down. People talking about 7 and 9 in the comments. I'm not entirely sure why. Let's go down to see if I have any more questions. Scrolling down, Ryan has a question. He says, RJ, I believe comic books offer a unique reading experience by teasing the imagination with what goes on between the panels. Exactly. After defining the character's environment, limitations, and goals. You are exactly right, Ryan. I agree 100% with that statement. That's why comics are unique, and that's why comics will never die, because it is a unique medium that can do things that no other medium can. And it is between the panels that the story comes to life. I agree completely, Ryan. Let's see, scrolling down. Gordon Goodbrother, I think, is talking about woke 90s or 80s comics. Hulk and hippies. Yeah, Hulk and hippies. Yeah, that was early 80s Hulk comics. Zekdan is saying, had not thought about the role of myth in the Iliad versus the Odyssey. Okay. Scrolling down. Let's see, scrolling down. If I can find any more comments. George says, oh yeah, I remember my LCS. Everyone in the store were upset with what they did to North Star. He was a ladies' man. He had this sister that was perfect. I mean, John Byrne drew Aurora as the perfect woman. I mean, literally, that was John Byrne's, I think, motivation for creating that character. And then you had the twin brother who was supposed to be the perfect male as opposed to the perfect female. And the perfect male, he was a ladies' man, and women were just fawning over him the entire time. That was his character. And yeah, I understand why people were so upset. Let's see. Gordon, you're laughing at this, but this I'm saying right here, right now, you're 100% right. French Canadians and Olympic skiers were irate. Yeah, they were. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. George says, let's see if I can get this up. I never collected Alpha Flight except the John Byrne issues, but I remember hearing people tell the store owner to cancel it when they're pulled from their pull box when that happened. Yeah. People were not happy at that at all. Let's see. Scrolling down. Have a lot of talk about John Byrne. Mystic says, I liked how John Byrne featured Calgary in the Iron Fist and X-Men. That's where he's from, isn't it? I think he's from Calgary, somewhere around there. Scrolling down. Zekdan asked the very pertinent question, is anyone as old as John? I'm not entirely sure. He's Methuselah. George says, John Byrne did everything. Avengers, Spider-Man, Superman, even minor titles in Marvel 2 and 1 and Namor. Yeah. By the time he got to Namor, I find that his style had started to go on the decline because he was looking for time savers. And I don't blame him looking for time savers, but I don't think that Namor series was the beginning, not so much of the end, but the beginning of the second part of his career where his art was not as detailed and, as in my opinion, as beautiful it was in the first part of it. Not to say it's bad in any way, but it just didn't match up to his earlier stamina. Scrolling down. Let's see if I have any more comments, questions. Oops, my chat has just jumped, so give me a second to find out where I am. Scrolling down, Vaz says, RJ, did you ever read Age of Bronze? I don't think so. That does not sound familiar to me. Rex says, RJ, you said monsters reflect humanity's worst traits. How do you view King Kong's sympathy in the original film or Godzilla's role shifting between hero and villain? Godzilla was supposed to be the horrific, we'll say, what is it? What is the word I'm looking for? The horrific, grotesque nature of what happens to living things when you got a nuclear bomb going off. He was supposed to be the embodiment of that fear, and he was for the Japanese people. The reason why the role shifted in from a villain to a hero is because it made money, and the first couple of movies made money, a lot more money than they put into it, and so it was just a money making machine after that as he became a hero. And again, the heroic nature of the character of Godzilla played out in how they created the future templates for the costume and how the person moved around in it. It was much more of a almost, let's just say, what do you call those things? The guys who get in the suits and run around on sports fields. What are they called? I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me, but that's what it became. For King Kong, King Kong had sympathy to it because there was, well, first of all, he's an ape. So the idea of apes and how they're connected to man played out from the 30s all the way to the, I'd say, 80s in a very unique way within the zeitgeist of Eastern, no, we'll say, the zeitgeist of Western civilization. But at the same time, the reason why there was sympathy brought into it was because he was basically portrayed as a giant primitive man. Because again, going back to this basically Darwinian idea that apes are just men that haven't evolved to that state yet. And that's what King Kong became. And it was reflected in how much emotion was put into his connection with the Faye Dunaway or whoever it was that was playing the female lead. Scrolling down. I'm starting to lose my voice after talking for about 2 hours. So I'll see if I can get through the last of these comments. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Question mark is here. How you doing? He says, evening. What are your thoughts on technology being a positive catalyst for virtues in stories and history? I'm not entirely sure of where I would go with that question mark. Technology expands our knowledge as long as we don't apply technological standards to even the language that we use to describe ourselves. I don't think that we should ever describe. I do this myself, and I try to catch myself when I do it and stop. But I don't think we should even use technological language in order to describe ourselves as if we were machines. I think we should use much more organic language, compare ourselves to a garden or a tree or vines or things like that. But again, technology expands our minds, and knowledge is a virtue. It is a virtue that can be corrupted. So it's not a pure virtue, but that's how we can use technology. And whether or not it can be put into stories exactly, I don't know. I'm looking at a lot of older science fiction and looking even at old like Star Trek Voyager and things like that. And their idea of where technology was going in the future just doesn't hold up after 20, 30 years for almost every science fiction story. So it has a very, let's just say, complicated connection, to say the least. Okay, I'm seriously losing my voice, so I'm going to try to get through some of these last comments before I go. Alessandro says, RJ, the progressives have messed up race relations so much that I now don't know what to believe anymore. I think that was no, I don't even have to say I think. That was the point of what they were doing, Alessandro. Literally, the critical theorists from the 60s, even maybe earlier, said and wrote down in their books that the biggest obstacle to the world revolution was America. And if the workers were ever to take over America and have it become a communist country, it needed to be done through race wars. And so that's why they're literally causing bad race relations because they want a race war, because that's how they will destroy America, and that's how the Marxist takeover of America in their minds and in their literature is supposed to happen. So yeah, that's purposely done. Let's see, scrolling down. Ryan says, RJ, do you think that a true atheist can write a truly virtuous, altruistic hero the way a true Christian can if they have no spiritual basis for their morality? I'm going to say no, Ryan, and I would have to think further on this to give a full answer to it, but my mind goes to the idea that if you look at the way that both the right and the left consume their media, the right consumes media both from the right and the left and can understand the left, whereas the left only consumes media from the left and can't typically understand the way that people on the right think. And I think the same thing would apply here. I think that a Christian is not only forced to consume, let's just say, non-Christian, but also secular ways of thinking in what they consume with stories and news and everything else, that they can understand both perspectives. I don't think an atheist has the true capacity to understand both perspectives. I think that that if you're an atheist and you can understand both perspectives, it would take you out of being an atheist, because if you can understand why a Christian believes what they do, and then read some of the logical explanations of, let's go back to the prime mover and things like that, you're going to talk yourself out of atheism, as far as I can say. So to me, they don't truly understand virtue in that way. Scrolling down. Greg says, RJ, excuse me, I meant that copyright as written in a law has 35 years. Then they made it into the mess in 99 years. We get sued for our own culture, so we have to be invisible when dealing with it. Yeah, I think copyright is just all screwed up. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, I go with razor fist on this. It has its drawbacks and its benefits for 35 years or for 95 years, but they need to stop tinkering with it at the very least. They need to come down on one side or the other. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. See if I can get through some more comments before my voice totally gives out on me. Let's see. Calliope is correct. He says, Marina, I can't remember, Marina, and Snowbird were pretty too in a more ethereal way. You got it exactly right when you say ethereal. I don't know if you've been watching the same videos that I watch about how to construct faces when translating them into art. Excuse me. Okay, I seriously have to get going, guys. My voice is just giving out. But you are right, Calliope. Scrolling down. I'm sorry, Baz. I don't think I have the stamina to answer this question. My voice doesn't, anyways. Age of Bronze's comic series retelling the legends of the Trojan War. It began in 1998 at Image Comics. No, that one I'm not familiar with. Scrolling down. Sandra says, RJ, in my opinion, Godzilla can play both heroic and evil roles because he embodies the power of the atom, which can be both good and a bad thing. Okay. Scrolling down. Tony says, RJ, what are your thoughts on John Byrne inserting lesbianism in not only Alpha Flight with the gender bent Sasquatch, but with Maggie Sawyer in Superman? Let me put it this way, Tony. As a kid who was reading those stories back in 1980s, I didn't get any of that. That just went completely over my head when I was reading the whole John Byrne stuff. Like If I was a kid reading comics, it was a waste. It was a wasted effort on his part. Now, looking back at it, yeah, I don't like it. But that's the problem why we have what we have today, because they tried to be subtle about it and they learned that no, people like myself just turn a blind eye if they ever even see it within what they're doing. So you're going to have to be ham-fisted. And that's why we have what we have today. Reaction, how you doing? Hopefully I can get through your comment. I'm losing my voice. RJ, how can you find superheroes? How can authentic? I'm a European Hungarian and find it very hard to imagine a authentic superhero story set in my country. Vampires or witches feel more real to me. I would say that's why the primary driver of superhero comic books up until, very recently with manga, has been North America. America is the land of the superhero ideal. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it depends on where you are in the world, whether or not you're going to find superheroes appealing to you and whether they're going to appeal to the majority of the people within your boundaries. But yeah, I can see why if you're a Hungarian, you might be more inclined to talk about vampire and witch stories. But again, the reason why superheroes became so great was not because they translate all over the world. It was because American culture was the dominant culture and people just wanted to be part of the dominant culture, really. Scrolling down. See if I can get into any more comments. Sandra says, RJ, it's true that certain ideas of science fiction after a few decades become outdated. Excuse me. But there are always retro science fiction fans like me who love those ridiculous atomic stories from the 1950s. I like those ridiculous stories too, but again, you're not going to get as many people reading From Here to the Moon as when it came out. Doesn't matter what you do to the story. Scrolling down. Let's see if I have any more comments for me. Jules says, RJ, who would win in a fight, John Carter or Tarzan? Well, Tarzan, obviously. John Carter only has strength because he's on a different planet. He doesn't actually have that strength on Earth. So if Tarzan were on Mars, he would be stronger than John Carter. If John Carter were on Earth, he'd be weaker than Tarzan. That would be my take on it. Let's see. Scrolling down. Gordon says, I need Powerade. Yeah. I don't have anything to grab that around me. I'm in my man cave of comic books here. I don't like to have liquids anywhere near my comics. Let's see. Scrolling down. Rex says, RJ, in the recent American movies, I heard the argument that Godzilla represents God at his most unknowable, regardless of if it does. I personally enjoy those films. Yes, I've heard the same thing, Rex. They talk about basically, well, I don't even know if it was the American ones, but if you like, I think it's Shinji Godzilla, the whole storyline was that Godzilla was supposed to become God. If they didn't defeat him, he would literally evolve until he became God, because they took it from the character being based on atomic fears to basically based on what is it? Basically based on Darwinian evolution. So they took a facet of the character, whereas it had evolved from something because of the atomic bomb, and put the focus more on the evolving part rather than the atomic bomb part, and therefore said, okay, what if he continues in this hyper realistic way to evolve because of this atomic structure, he would become God. So yeah, I've come across the same ideas. Scrolling down, scrolling down, scrolling down. Let's see. Pedro says, RJ, what's the most original but useful superpower you have ever heard or read? The most original but useful? I don't know if I could take those two and put them together. Honestly, for my own part, I think the most useful superpower personally would be teleportation, quite honestly. People, it is the most overpowered if you could use it in a very controlled way. People were going on about this a long time ago, but the fact that you could open up a portal basically from where you are to the bottom of the ocean, and the bottom of the ocean water would be under such pressure that it would shoot out like basically a laser and cut anything in half, anything you could think of, any person, any supervillain, whatever. But I don't know about original. I really don't know about original. Scrolling down. Let's see, scrolling down. People talking about Frankenstein, 2000 Leagues Under the Sea, Tarzan. Great comments here, but I need to get through and see if any of these are for me. Shinji, that's right, Shinji Godzilla. That's right, that's what I was thinking of, Michael. Let's see. Scrolling down. I think I've gotten to the end. There's a lot of crosstalk. You guys are having a great conversation in the comments, but no more comments for me. So I will just leave it as Pedro has the last word, and we'll leave it at that. I have to take Pedro off. And I want to thank everybody for being here. We got almost 40 people in the chat right now. Wow. That's great. Almost 40 people in the chat now. Thank you very much for everybody for showing up. I apologize for the fact that I'm losing my voice. This is what happens usually when I do an hour and a half on John's channel and then try to do about two hours on mine, or an hour or more. I guess it's only been an hour and 8 minutes, but thank you very much for everybody for showing up. I think I will just play the trailer for Fade to Blue once again as an outro, just to let everybody know again. The link for Fade to Blue is in the description of this video. Go on over and leave your email address there so you can be informed when the project goes live. We have those books coming out very soon. Beautiful storyline that I always wanted to do a monster type storyline, and that's why I tried to combine the idea of film noir and sort of like a Indiana Jones feel to it, because it has monsters in it, even though it's has a film noir feel to it. Anyways, I will play that as an outro, but thank you once again, everybody, for showing up. Glad to see so many people here. Hopefully my failing voice didn't put you off too much, and I will see you all later, either in my weekend video coming up on Saturday or here next week. All right. I'll see you all later. Bye.